Thank you. Appreciate it. Sir, how you doing? Welcome.
Hello, hello.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. I have to balance my air conditioner. I don't know if you guys do, but it's so loud, but I want it on at all times. So it's like, okay, now I'm on.
It's pretty cool where I'm at right now.
Yeah, no.
Lucky you.
Complaining, but we're at like plus 32 today.
Yeah, I know you've been struggling with that heat wave out there. You're still smiling though, so that's good.
It's up for debate. I think it's just heat stroke.
Yeah, that's great. Rondell, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing all right. Can't complain.
Awesome. Yeah, I love the outfit. You're showing us all up.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Black works too, Kofi.
Okay, good.
We're doing it.
I got my business attire and my shorts. So the official Zoom outfit.
That's awesome, man. So we'll just sort of give it a few minutes so everybody could join. I think we'll get kicked off at about, let's say, like 6:03 or so, 6:04. And but while everybody's here, what's one of the things that I love to ask is, what's the best thing that's happened to you today? So Odian, we'll start with you. What's the best thing that's happened to you today?
Oh, no pressure. So I spent Canada Day long weekend at an Indigenous ceremony that I participated in, a ghost dance ceremony, very similar to Sundance. And you go through like a lot of healing and learning in the process. But today I was having interactions with people, and right away I could see like the reactions that I bring in, or how I can do something that can cause barriers between people. And it was almost like an out-of-body experience, like, oh, I've done this before. So to me, that was my favorite part of my day, is realizing like how sometimes like my over eagerness or panickiness can completely change the dynamics of a conversation. So it was really enlightening. I think that's actually been my favorite part of the day, and my air conditioner.
Oh, I mean, that's beautiful. So you're really kind of talking about, how your reaction to events could sort of like cause this chain reaction, right? So
Even at work, like you're like, oh, okay, this isn't the right reaction, and just how your emotions can set, like, it, but to have that out of body experience, be like, oh, I've done this to somebody.
Yeah.
Is a different reaction.
Yeah, that's awesome. Kofi, best thing that's happened to you today, sir?
Today's just been a blur of meetings and work. What's the best thing that happened today? My daughter surprised me during a meeting with a big hug and a kiss. That was a highlight.
That must have been nice. Were you like totally caught off guard? Or?
Well, I could hear her coming up the stairs, but I was in the middle of presenting, and then yeah, she just showed up. So that was awesome.
When that happens, does it like totally throw you off, or are you able to like recover?
I mean, it's Zoom world, right? People are used to that.
Yeah,
And we were fine. My business partner waved to her, and people just kept, again, they just
kept
kept
doing
on
their
going.
thing.
It used to be a thing, right? And people were like, oh, cute. I think now everyone's used to partners, pets, kids, everything showing up on the call. So,
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Hey, Rondell, best thing that's happened to you today?
Um, the best thing was probably buying a gift for someone I care about who's going through something, and just the reaction that they got when they received it. I wasn't in the best mood today, but something I've learned is, give love when you feel that you're not getting it. So it was nice to be able
mm,
to give some love and receive some back. Not to get love back, but just because it's the right thing to do. So.
Yeah, that's beautiful, man. I'm so glad you shared that because it's a natural innate thing in us to just give up for ourselves, right? Because the joy that it brings to us is just amazing. So thanks for sharing that. That's wicked. So, I'll share kind of the best thing that happened to me today is I took my family down to Niagara Falls. So we were kind of hanging out for a bit. And then on the way back, I hit a bunch of traffic and I was saying, there's no way I'm going to make it home on time. So I was calling up a bunch of folks. Eventually, like, hit up a friend. I hadn't talked to him. Shout out to Oliver, man, in a bit. And he's like, hey, welcome to my house. So I just tried to get here, get set up, and just made it on time. So, I mean, great thing. Best thing that happened to me today. Awesome. So, we're at 6:03, so I think we could get started. Um, really love to sort of be in this vibe, this energy. I love the energy. I feel it. And I think that I see all the hearts and the waves coming in because I think everybody else who's on is kind of really feeling the energy. This is our second installment of our mental health hour. And we're on a quest to open up the conversation about Black mental health and demystify the stigma associated with Black mental health. And I want to kind of highlight that the reason why we're so proud of this is because it's a conversation that's been initiated by Black men. And when you think in the whole, dynamic of mental health, we're sort of the less candidates to be able to initiate this conversation. And what we want to do is we want to make this the norm, right? We want to be able to kind of say, hey, it's totally cool to be able to talk about this. And we always want to infuse all sort of energies. And, one of the reasons why we're really excited to have Odeon on the call is because she's bringing a tremendous amount of insight. She's been doing a lot of tremendous work out in Edmonton in the mental health field. And she's also an amazing writer, Amazon recognized writer, And so Odeon, I'm going to pause there and kind of say, hey, I want you to introduce yourself. But, prior to me doing that, I want to say, listen, Brothers Who Care is all about making connections, connecting people, and ensuring that we provide the right resources to individuals so that we could tap into all the things that are available to us and make it, really great. So, so that's a perfect introduction. So, Odeon, over to you.
Well, thank you for that. There's just a little bit of pressure to maintain now, but when you talk about connections, it's really interesting because it was Simone Sanders that connected me with you because of my personal work and my work at the Africa Center. So when we connect, it can make literally Canada be so small because Simone is in Calgary and you guys are in Ontario and I'm in Alberta. So it's a very humbling experience. For myself, I am here mainly on like the Africa Center's behalf because during the day, I like to say, I am the mental health youth coordinator leading a project in collaboration with the Public Health Agency of Canada to not only gather data, but use the information that we get from like doing activities that create that support the awareness of preventative mental health techniques in Black Canadians, but turning it into something. And so one of the things that we were able to do is open up Western Canada's first free Black focused counseling clinic. And it was because the activities we did, we'd use counselors, and people would say like, I want to, here's my barriers. And so it's removing those barriers. And in the evening, I am currently taking my master's. I'm about to go into my thesis. And I, like you said, I'm a 4 times Amazon bestseller, which is a weird thing to say sometimes because the book has placed me in really cool positions. And my nerdy self always wants to talk about like leading the first diverse panel at Comic-Con. But I'm like, oh, hey, people care about the book. And I'm like, let's talk about Comic-Con. But I do those things because I've suffered with my mental health for many years, and being a mixed race individual from an immigrant family, it was always an interesting discussion because it's like, you are in Canada, like what is there to be upset about? And it was really breaking through that stigma and finding my own health and kind of developing this passion to create the journey so that others can know it's a safe space to talk about their health. And so that is me, but I'm definitely not as cool as everybody else on this panel.
You know, I like how you like to play it off, being all humble and stuff. But I mean, we have a crazy panel today, and you know, thank you so much for sharing. And it's all about making that connection, right? And so I'm gonna move over to Rondell, and Rondell is probably the most popular man on this panel. You know, great amount of spotlight. Anointed poet by the city of Toronto. You know, writer, curator, founder, doing some great work, and you've been doing a great work for a number of different years with your individual organization too, Rondell. And so I won't even steal your thunder. I'm going to sort of just pass it on to you and say, Rondell, tell the people who you are. And just when he was about to do that, he's freezing up.
Like the circle of
So
doom.
we've got to kind of clown him on that. We'll give him hey, here he goes.
Somebody was calling me while we were doing this. Well, firstly, shout out to everyone that joined. I see a lot of faces and friends that I know from, you know, different sectors and different spaces. My dude Pen Moods, Dewan, a lot of people that I love and care for just tuning in. You know, welcome. Thanks for being here around this conversation about Black mental health, especially for Black men. Myself, I am a poet, author, speaker, the founder of Rise Entertainment, just someone who's really about making a difference in this world, inspiring others to leave a legacy, to, you know, leave their mark and not their stain. And I was recently appointed the first Poet Laureate of Ontario, which has been an incredible couple months to do this work. And I think what's really exciting about it is every day I'm realizing just how much privilege this position and title comes with, and the opportunity to really make a difference, not just for arts and culture, but, you know, especially for individuals that look like me who are artists. And so I'm really excited about the position, but also more excited about this conversation and with respect to how we can continue to further this conversation. And also want to big up my brother Kofi. You know, Kofi and I go way, way back. He's been a mentor of mine for a little while. And so to be on a panel with him, someone I respect and have nothing but utmost love for, is just really beautiful to see. So much love, much love, much love. Thanks for having me here today.
Hey, Rondell, every time I talk to you, you know, for all the accolades and the impact that you're making, there's always that sense of humbleness, you know, towards you. And I love that and appreciate that so much. I mean, the impact that you're making, the example that you're setting for our generation, the older generation, those to come, and your generation, you know, is immeasurable. And I just want to kind of applaud you on that, just maximum amount of respect. And Kofi, I'll shift over to you, sir. I mean, I think I first got into, you know, the domain of Kofi when Brothers Who Care were kind of raising some funds, and the first organization that we raised funds donated to was C Toronto. And I know that that's kind of one of your brainchild, and you've moved on to do so many great things, including your monumental a startup that's just really creating a big impact with organizations. So again, I don't want to steal your thunder. I'd rather you do that. So why don't you tell us who you are?
All right, all right. And thank you, and good evening, everyone. And always great to be here and share with folks. So yeah, a little bit about myself. I'm an entrepreneur at the moment. I'm a man who wears many hats, but currently the focus is a startup called Monumental, and we do consulting and strategic advising with major institutions, especially about how they think about strategy and the question everyone is asking today about how do we think about equity and anti-racism and put it in our processes. And so that's a cool role where I get to work with CEOs of major institutions in the country, but also exciting groups in communities. I did some work with the Black Screen Office, working on their strategic plan a few months ago, and the Black Opportunities Fund. And so a mix of groups in development space, governmental and national NGOs. And then along with that, I write a column for the Toronto Star every month. And I'm assistant professor or adjunct professor at U of T, and I've been teaching there for the last couple of years. And as you mentioned, yeah, about 7 years ago, co-founded an organization called the C Center for Young Black Professionals with a woman named Shireen Ashman, and was executive director for the first 6 years of life of that group. And that's an organization that focuses on supporting Black young men and women, especially those who face barriers. So might have been in conflict with the law or precarious housing or facing educational trauma or young parents, all these different barriers. And we have a wraparound culturally based program that helps move them from crisis to stability to a pathway to flourish in a career. And so that is a legacy I'm really proud of and still a supporter of. And today, yeah, I think more of a social entrepreneur and try to do thought leadership where I can about how we build just a better, more progressive and inclusive society for everyone.
Hey, amazing, man. Like I can't say enough about, the work that you are doing and continue to do it. And I love how you bring in kind of the social entrepreneurship because, we live in an age where there continues to be less focus on profit, and organizations are being challenged to kind of say, as you operate, what are you doing to impact your communities, right? What are you doing to not just kind of focus on earning, but sort of building a good employee base and really impacting the world at large. So the work that you're doing is really, really impactful. So, I'm really excited to jump into the conversation. Great panel, as we've said. Today, we're focusing on the social determinants of mental health. And we've been talking about what are these different things. And there's so much that we could talk about as it relates to this topic. But I think as we met earlier, just in preparation for this discussion, we figured, hey, let's narrow it down and talk about a couple of things that we think are really impactful. And I'd love for you to kind of share your personal stories. So, one of the first things that we want to talk about as far as it relates to the social determinants is how we navigate complex systems, right? And how we within their systems operate and overcome adversity and being able to sort of navigate through that. And so, why don't I pass it all off to you, Rondell, to sort of kickstart off with that discussion, and then, Odion and Kofi, you could weigh in.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to say. First and foremost, I love the quote that says the system, is not broken. It just wasn't designed for us. And I think it's important to recognize that this is a system that is archaic, system that was essentially built upon racist, discriminatory practice. And so it's really important to acknowledge that the system with which we all navigate is something that is embedded with a lot of hatred and discrimination, first and foremost. So as we navigate these systems, as we came into the system, it already wasn't built for us. And so what it is that we're navigating is how do we ensure that we are maneuvering the systems accordingly, but at the same time, how can we continue to protect our families and our households, which is often a very difficult and challenging thing for many Black men. And it's a challenge for a lot of Black men because it will require it requires a lot, first and foremost, to really be able to navigate and maneuver the system. As you're dealing with your personal, professional, emotional, physical, like there's so many different aspects that we're trying to ensure that are whole, in order to ensure that we're protecting our families. And I think there's also a pressure that's placed upon Black men to just get it right. You know, there's pressure that's placed upon ourselves within our community. There's pressure that's placed upon ourselves from our partners, pressure that we place upon ourselves because we want to do better. And for me, I can speak for myself to say I've always wanted to strive to be better than my father. He's a great man, but I wanted to do better because, you know, seeing the way he was trying to navigate the system wasn't the most conducive for my mom and I and my family. But at the end of the day, I can't blame him because it's something that he wasn't necessarily taught. He wasn't taught how to navigate and maneuver the system first and foremost. So, you know, it reminds me of this idea that smart people learn from their mistakes, but wise people learn from others. So when I think about that, I think about how can we, as the next generation coming up, how are we able to ensure that we can further what our parents, what our fathers were able to do and provide, and looking at the structure, the framework that we were given in childhood as we were growing up. What does it look like to continue to kind of bolster that, to improve upon some of the issues that we've seen there? And then, I mean, I think about a couple of things. Like there's so much to share here. There's a lot to share here. It's such a deep conversation, and hopefully, you know, we can really dive in as best as we possibly can. But you know, financially, I'll just start with the financial aspect of things. Financially, within our community, through research and some of the things I've learned, you know, we, I guess, how do I say this? Like there's a lot of pressure. Let's just say there's a lot of pressure. I think it's just easier to say there's a lot of pressure to be able to continue to advance as an individual, to be the best possible version of yourself. And so I'm kind of going to go back to the situation with my father. So when I think about my dad, I didn't necessarily see my dad ever take the time to work on himself. I never see my dad take care of himself. I never see my dad, you know, just take some time to say, I'm taking some time for me. And again, it's not something I can blame him for, but he just wasn't taught that. You know, my dad's a very proud Ghanaian man. And as a proud Ghanaian man, he just has this thing like, I got it all figured out. I'm good, you know, but you see the ways in which it affected him with trying to protect us and take care of us. The ways in which he came home with a burden from the system, with a burden having to be the type of man that he is and having to kind of be at the bottom of a totem pole, you know, working in factories, working at a bank and navigating these systems. And then of course he comes home and he has his challenges that inadvertently my mom and I are kind of have to, you know, gonna have to navigate from that first and foremost. And then I think about just the challenges about the emotional, you know, the emotional. I'm trying to just go through different aspects of protecting the household and maneuvering these systems, you know. The emotional side, we speak of being vulnerable as a man as a sign of weakness. We speak of being vulnerable as something that means that you are lackluster, that you're not good enough, when truly and truthfully, being vulnerable really requires a lot of bravery and a lot of courage. And I think if my father was able to be vulnerable to share what he's been going through, navigating and maneuvering these systems that are clearly mentally and emotionally damaging him, which he then brings into our household, it would have been easier for me to better understand. So now I'm taking on what my dad, you know, has gone through, and I'm basically at a young age thinking this is okay, that it's okay to come home and not talk to your family. It's okay to come home and bring your stuff home because that's all I've seen. And there's a book that I really love, and I just want to speak to this as well too, because in my neighborhood, I was 2 out of 10, you know, Black men that had my father in my household growing up. And I just want to speak to this idea. There's a book that I read called No More Mr. Nice Guy. It's a really powerful book that I would recommend anybody read. It just speaks to how men can be more grounded within themselves and how men can really show up for themselves, because that's not something many of us men, especially Black men, are taught what that means. So it speaks to this idea that back in the day, in the early 1900s, basically in the early 1900s, the ways in which men were taught about masculinity were at home with their fathers, right? And so whether it was out in the backyard cleaning, or whether it was out in the backyard building, or whether it was in the community, you know, being with your father, learning about maleness, learning about masculinity, that's how we learn about masculinity. But of course, the Industrial Revolution came, and the Industrial Revolution forced men of all kinds to leave their homes to either find work or go to war. And so when these men left their homes and left to go to work or left to go to war, the young men were left at home with their mothers, of course. And so mom became the one who was teaching you how to be masculine. And even if they weren't gone, dad would come home at the end of the day, and dad's tired, of course. Dad doesn't have the capacity to show you what does maleness look like, because you're coming home from a deficit place, right? And so these young men then go to school. And when they go to school, who teaches them? Often female, women that teach them what it means. And they're learning about masculinity through women. So essentially, women are nurturers, you know, naturally, women are nurturers, right? And so a lot of us men have taught to be nurturers, which is a very beautiful thing. But I think we've lost that idea of maleness. And so maneuvering the system and protecting your home is coming from a place of not really being shown what it looks like. And if you are shown what it looks like, it doesn't come from a very true and holistic aspect. And so I just think about the next generation, like this generation, you know, and what was a predominant family household in the past, or what was a common structure of a family is not what it is right now, right? It's not the same. And so I guess, you know, just kind of lastly on that point, you know, maneuvering the system, I just think about the importance of us having more conversations as men, the importance of us really taking the time to share our challenges, to share our adversities and the learning lessons. I think there's something to be said about the learning lessons that come through adversity, and how we can really be able to use the lessons and extract the lessons to really be able to support one another, to help heal one another. One man may be really good when it comes to navigating the financial side. One man may be really good when it comes to navigating the household side, like taking care of the house, or being a good husband, or being a good father, or being a good community leader, because all of these things are encompassing and more of what it means to. And I think if us men were able to have more of these conversations where our vulnerability could really come at the forefront, and that we can really praise our vulnerability, if we can really like celebrate the vulnerability that we have, I think there's something really powerful about the learning lessons that we'd be able to share with one another. So I feel like that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to maneuvering systems. But, you know, if Odian or Kofi, you want to add to your thoughts on anything I shared, or anything with respect to maneuvering the system, I'm happy to, you know, continue the dialogue there.
Yeah, I think
So
the one thing
then, like, go ahead, Kofi, go ahead.
yeah, the one thing I'd say about systems, right? And so we've got different systems, whether we're talking about our justice system or legal system, or some might say injustice system. We have our education system, we have the workforce system, we have systems around government. The reality is, all of these systems were built with kind of a Eurocentric perspective, right? Of kind of European ideals and norms and culture as being the baseline, and everything else being other and different. And they're also built with a real kind of middle class bias to it, right? Whether you think about when you go to interact with government, you know, the complexity of many of the forms that you fill in, the way in which, you know, they never make it easy, from filing your taxes to applying for daycare to other pieces. There's a true bias towards people who've had both the educational background, but also were raised in families where you were taught this is how you maneuver systems. This is, you know, this is how you advocate for yourselves. And so often these systems can be so crushing because they also have anti-Black racism built in, right? They were built to not think about our communities. They're built by folks and maintained by people creating policies who aren't connected. But then there is also this inherent bias. And you see that because you see folks who've had that exposure, who have had that experience, who can make the system work for them. And then folks who are working hard, who are, you know, 2 or 3 jobs to make things work, who are out there, who are good people, who just struggle. to get things in the out of the system that are there for them, whether it's, you know, finding ways to, you know, the alternate paths that are to post-secondary that are out there, whether it's knowing, you know, when so many things with government, if you get a no, there's usually another way to get a yes. If you call up the right people, if you write a letter. You know, I remember one time I got dinged by the CRA with my taxes and just wrote like a really articulate letter explaining it, and they came and they forgave the money I owed. And I just remember seeing that, and that was so much from the class position I was in, because I had people I could call up who could tell me, yo, tell them this, say this there. And so we have a system that, because of the financial position that so many folks are in our community are in, and with people coming from other countries and other contexts, navigating the system is not always a skill that is that readily available. And these systems are only now trying to open the door and think about being culturally relevant, thinking about creating access points, thinking about helping to guide folks to get through them. But many times we can just look at the child welfare system. I think it's 46% of the children that are removed from households and put into care in Toronto are Black children. And we make up 8.9% of the population. And so much of that, right, is about how these systems operate, about people's ability to deal with these officials who are coming into your home, prodding at your cultural practices, you know, reviewing whether you're a good parent or not. You know, not that there aren't issues that show up in Black families, but it's certainly not at the proportion that we see that's happening. And so much of that has to do with systems that aren't built to work well for us. And the last thing I'll say about the systems and the bias is just think about streaming, right? I was on a call today with a client. We were doing an anti-racism training for, I won't say, but very high profile Canadians. And we were talking about different pieces, and streaming came up. And I had to say, I have to be honest. I know many Black men who are professionals, legal professionals, doctors, have gone to other places. Almost every one of them, when you talk to them, they have a story in high school of the guidance counselor sitting them down and saying, I don't think post-secondary is for you. You know, have you thought about carpentry? Nothing against carpentry. Big up, I've got good friends who are carpenters, make great money. It is an important profession. But the fact that that was seen as the only option just shows the way in which these systems are built. And some people will have parents who understand the system and fight. Myself, I got a PhD at Oxford University. When I was in grade 4, they wanted to put me in a kind of a remedial class and say, oh, we think he has a learning disability. It's only because my mom had a master's degree, she was educated, and she came in there and she fought that system. She navigated and said, no, you're not getting it right. You're not actually seeing the truth behind my son and where he's at. And the fact is, a system that you need to have class privilege and education to get the best out of it is not an equal or democratic system. And it's not a system working for us. And so now, thankfully, with education in other places, we're admitting the anti-Black racism that's built into these systems. But the question now is, how do we open them up to actually work for our community? And I think that is the work before our generation right now.
I just want to add something really quickly, if you don't mind, because especially around the education system, I went to a school in Malvern. I went to high school in Malvern. And if you know, Malvern in Toronto is, you know, at the time, a lot of crime that happened at that side. So I met a friend who went to Northern, which is at Bayview and Finch. And so I talked to him about what his grade 12 year was. We had to fight. We actually wrote a petition to fight to get writer's craft at the grade 12 level. So I literally had philosophy and writer's craft that was beyond the traditional system, curriculum. And so just to find out, they got anthropology, they had sociology. So this is Bayview. So these are the children of parents that are more higher, you know, like they make, they're in a different tax bracket. And so those are the ones that they're streaming to become bosses, to become leaders. But just 30 minutes down the street, we're deemed as the ones who should be working in a factory, who aren't even smart enough to take a writer's craft class, you know? And so the streaming is really interesting because a lot of us has fallen into the cracks of this streaming. So just wanted to bring that up, but great points, Kofi. Thank you.
Yeah, I love that. And, you know, as you both said, we're just like touching the iceberg, right? There's so much to talk about. And Odin, I'd love to get your perspective on it, but, you know, maybe you could take more of access to resources. Like, what are some of the tools or resources that we could start to reach out to you know, to break through and deal with the complexities of the systems that we know we're faced against?
Yeah, it's funny because it was like taking notes. I'm like, I want to make sure I say this. I want to make sure I say that. Like finger snap to that. Like Randall and Kofi really hit a lot of things on the head, and I just like um, Kofi, you said something. And I was like, you don't know what you don't know, and we forget that as a race. And so much of it is like when it comes to accessing resources, it starts in sharing these stories. Like my brother is a genius. There's no discussion about it. He gets mad when I say it. He tried to go for Mensa and was like 2 points away from it. Like, you weren't even allowed to write the exam. Let's keep up here, right? But when we were in elementary school, he had a little bit of a stutter and he was very introverted. And so they wanted to put him in a special school. And at first, my mom, like, it was a big thing. And like, you get that black mother who's in there. She's like, oh, hell no. Like, that really was what happened. And they were able, my mom had friends that were able to, like, help fight and get it so that my brother could be, like, half in the special school and half in the normal school. But he ended up a grade behind me when it was all said and done. But he's so smart. He did, well, I was in grade 2 thinking like, haha, you're in grade 1 because we're twins. He did grade 1 and grade 2. And it was because the teacher at the time really believed in him and allowed him to do both grades. And so then we ended up in grade 3 together. But people will look at him and be like, oh, you're so smart, you're this and that. And there was all these challenges he had to go through to get to that level. And it's when we don't share the stories of like where we came from, people can get frustrated. And like this generation that's here right now is kind of thinking there's no options because they don't know about the times we fought. And they don't know about the allies that exist, because when it comes to the system, as much as there's a system, we create the system when we tell people our one story where we got our no, or we got our fear, and not the stories of what we overcame. And that entrenches in the system so much, where I think about Jordan's Law, where, do you guys know about Jordan's Law? Anyone? Okay, we got one person. So to catch you up, the very shortest version is there was a period of time where if an Indigenous child was sick in the hospital of Canada, the provincial government and federal government were arguing over who was paying the bill. So there was like young Indigenous children who were sick who ended up dying in the hospital, but never even having one day in their own home, because the nurses in the medical system enforced the rule of there's no bill paid instead of just saying go home. And there was one incident where one nurse like snuck the kid out so that they could go to like their home for Christmas or something. And it's us as people, regardless of race, that help a system stay up. And we have to challenge that, and we have to ask our allies to challenge it too. And so when it comes to mental health for like men and women and whatever gender you classify yourself as, there has to be the conversation of what exists and what we've done. Like when it comes to counseling, I've talked to men and they'll say, oh, you're just trying to stick my balls in a chain and castrate me, right? Instead of talking about that health. But if they have another guy who says, hey, me and my spouse were going through some things, counseling fixed it, now there's the conversation. But then, well, what I find happens, especially like within the Black race, is someone will say, here's how you do it, but they'll find the negative. So they'll say, well, I don't have benefits for counseling. Okay, well, is there a free clinic? How can we challenge ourselves to access all the resources that are there by looking for them? And so like I always have like lists where I go to, but there's so many resources that aren't Eurocentric that exist now that are here. And because of this pandemic, as tragic as it was, it opened up a lot in Canada and the States. So Ontario is very fortunate. Like you guys have Taboo, you have Pathways to Care. There's so many resources that are out there really advocating to have the non-Eurocentric point and provide preventative resources and intern resources from that Black perspective that reach into our cultural roots of community and understanding. And then you have like the American ones. There's a youth hotline specifically for Black youth to call in that's based out of Brooklyn, but because of the pandemic, it'll let Canadian Black youth call now. And it's like a 1-800 number. But instead we get caught up in the mindset of like, I got told no once when I went to do that, or I went once and you know, I got the most racist jerk of a counselor I could get. I think there's nothing else. And so that's where, when it comes to resources, yes, the government needs to do more and everybody needs to do more, but we have a responsibility on ourselves, and our allies have a responsibility to share their positive experiences with resources and the resources that exist.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my rant.
So, that's so real. You know, I love that you mentioned Taboo. You know, like we made a donation to Taboo a couple months ago to continue the great work that you're doing. But yeah, there's tons of resources that are doing wonderful work, and we just need to tap into them. And so I don't know, Rondell or Kofi, if you want to kind of weigh in on that resource angle. And let's not always look at it from an organizational perspective, but let's look at it from a brotherhood and a sisterhood perspective, and kind of ask ourselves and challenge ourselves around what are some of the things that we could do to tap into our immediate circles to build that resource support.
Yeah, maybe I would just say on that. So there is an institutional piece, right? And I did some work with U of T and the Wellesley Institute. We went door to door in Rexdale and Eglinton East and Dorset Park, parts of Scarborough, to really talk to residents about what was working in their neighborhood, what wasn't working. It was like a whole kind of scientific survey, but instead of calling folks, we actually went to people's houses to make sure it was representative. And we learned so much about these, more marginalized neighborhoods in the city, and what people are looking for. And a lot of people, when it came to services, said, most of the time we leave our neighborhood for our family doctor. We're okay with that. You know, we've got our health clinics, but the one thing across the east and west end of the city that people said we don't have and that we need is mental health services locally. Right? Like that are in walking distance, that are accessible to us. And so I think there is, as much as there are those resources and some of the virtual ones, I think actually, like I worked at the Black Creek Community Health Center for a while in Jane and Finch, and those counselors there, the waiting lists were massive, right? It was person after person after person after person after person. And so when we think about our Medicare system, you know, right now, for our physical health, we have a belief it's a human right that all of us can access the services we need. If I've got a heart condition, if I've got diabetes, this and that. But we haven't transferred that yet to our mental health, right? That every Canadian who needs therapy should have access to it, right? That everyone who needs some of those supports, because otherwise all we do is it's just pills, right? We're just medicating it. When many times we need not to in any way put down medication, but to say that is not enough. And many times they've shown talk therapy can have the same effects, but of course it's expensive. And so I think that's one of the pieces to push on. The other piece in community is, yes, how do we create those networks of support? And that was one of the key things at C, is we had young people many times in crisis or in a difficult place in life. And we were very intentional to bring them in. And I know Randall came to our retreats and different events, but to build little communities with each cohort of other young Black men and women, of peers in the same position, who are there to do something positive in their life. And many people would say, man, it's the only place I've got right now, social network, where I show up and I'm just getting positive vibes back. And there's staff here who look like me, who've been in the same place and have accomplished something that I can see and get inspired for. But this community holds me up. And it is isolating to survive in this hyper-consumerist, capitalist society as a Black person, as a Black man, on your own. And Randall talked about providing for your family. What allows me and what allows so many others to hold up is to know that we have a community around us that lifts us up. And so how do we rebuild those structures, right? Historically, many times it came from the church. It came from community organizations and groups. And we know after the last 30 years, attendance in these kind of groups has gone down. Is it going back in time to those formations? I don't know. Is it building new ones? But all I know is that model of having communities of care and positivity and people you're in crisis. I wonder, how many people here, if you are in crisis, do you have folks you can call and will come? If you said, oh, I'm just having a tough day, can someone come by and can I talk to you? If I need a mental health break, I need someone to help watch my kids for a couple hours, right? Many times we're not in those networks of support, and so we suffer alone. And I don't think it's about just being tougher and pushing through. Many times it's about how do we come together and support each other. So when you're feeling weak, you're feeling down, I can say, run down, my brother, I've got you.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to feel, but it's a tough world. It's a tough life. It's okay to feel down. It's okay to feel things aren't going well because, I've got your back. And when I have the same, I know you're there to support me. And that's why big up to Brothers Who Care, right? Like it's a wonderful space you guys have of a network of Black men who are there for positivity and to support each other and build community. And I think we need more of that across the city in every neighborhood.
100%.
That's beautiful, man. Well said. I think you've talked on it. Odien's touched on it. Rondell's touched on it. On kind of that whole idea around when faced with challenges, you are able to draw on resources to be able to overcome those challenges. But there's this aspect of self-care, right? Actually acknowledging that I do need help, right? So, maybe we could talk about that a little bit. What does self-care mean? And what are the signs that you actually do need to reach out to get help? And when you reach out for help, what are some of the things that you could actually do to drive that self-care home? Maybe you could kind of share some personal experiences, Odin, from the work that you're doing, Rondell, some of the things that you've overcome, and then Kofi, kind of some of the things that you're kind of seeing across the organizations that you're working in.
Yeah, thanks for that. It's interesting because you say self-care, but so often we think self-care like when we're sick, right? Like, oh, I have a cold, now I'm going to drink tea that's good for me, instead of like, always eating healthy food. When it, unfortunately, like I love social media, but unfortunately, like social media has created this narrative that if you're having a mental health issue, you're better in a day. But those mental health, like your mental health issues in general, are usually built upon various triggers and traumas. And then there's this moment that you break. And unless you're doing regular self-care, it doesn't matter. And regular self-care looks different compared to where you're at in life, what the traumas you're experiencing are, what the triggers that you know from your past are or you don't know what from your past are, and creating a toolbox of self-care that's good for you. And so sometimes self-care is just, taking that moment to go to the gym, because yeah, it's great for your physical health, but it's great for your mental health because it removes stimuli. Or there's a lot of people be like, I can't meditate because I can't sit still. But that's not the point of meditating when you really go into it, right? And so, is it taking 5 minutes to do a YouTube video of a guided meditation, knowing you probably won't turn off your brain, but having it and challenging yourself to those everyday things. Like for myself, throughout this whole pandemic, I go for a walk in the morning, even if it's for 5 minutes before I log into work. If I sleep in, I have to go walk around the block. That's my commitment to myself. And when I don't do it, and when I'd have periods where I didn't, my mental health was compromised. Same with like, it's bougie, according to my friends, but floating for me, like float deprivation tanks, allows, yeah, okay. So float deprivation tanks.
Tell us more about that.
That's not bougie.
Oh my gosh, everybody bugs me about it. But with float deprivation tanks, you literally, they were originally used actually on autistic children to reduce this like senses, and like it creates sensory deprivation. And there's pods or tanks or all these various forms, but essentially you're in like 90% salt water. You can't touch the ground no matter who you are. Trust me, I struggle to float. You're just floating and you're in pure silence, pure darkness. You can turn on little lights if you're claustrophobic, and you actually shut off from the world. And it's a different experience every time. Sometimes I sit there and with it, I think the whole time, oh my gosh, they forgot about me. And other times I just fall right asleep, or if I'm working on a paper, my brain will just leave my writer's block. And so for me, it's like, that is something that's super important. Also family time. I love being auntie. And so taking the kids to the park is my self-care. Whereas for other people, getting away from their kids is their self-care. But self-care is different for everyone and where you are. There's a period of time where weightlifting was the only thing that would put me in a state of sense. As a writer, journaling, coloring. I have coloring. My color, actually there's a felt in front of me. My calendar is a
Are you gonna show
couple.
us?
Well, I can without like tearing apart everything. But I have coloring books in every part of my house and felts because that's what centers me and is my self-care. And for everybody, it's different. Like I have one male friend who it's a fidget spinner. Like that's his moment is playing with that fidget spinner, and that's his self-care. But again, self-care needs to be something, to bring it full circle, self-care needs to be something that can do daily if possible or regularly, but it also has to be something that's true to you. Because I'll go for a walk, but if you ask me to go for a run, you're just going to make me miserable, right? So what is it that you need? I can go be in a soca jam all day long. You put me in an Afro beat dance class, I'm miserable. So what is it that
Hey.
as an individual, no,
I'm playing.
I'm confused. I'm like, I'm left, I'm right. Like, if somebody's on a true Albertan, I feel more comfortable at a country jam, but it's different for everybody, and we have to stop removing self-care as when we need it and more of an everyday, how do we do it, or a once a week moment to set ourselves up for success, regardless of our gender. Otherwise, we're trying to fix something once it's broken.
Exactly.
So
I have to speak to this, Odin. You like, there's so many points I was gonna say, you just about nailed almost all of them. And it's so crazy how we often, I think it's kind of indicative of our healthcare system. It's a very band-aid approach to curing and helping people. And I say band-aid approach because it's reactionary. Once the problem happens, then we want to put the band-aid on the wound. And I think the only thing I'd really add to what you were saying, Odion, is just really about this idea that, I think self-care should be something that we build a toolkit, as you mentioned. And if you just write down all the different things that help you feel good, that's it. Like literally just write down a list of the things that make you feel good. And then if you can even choose 3 or 4 things that make you feel good that you can do every day, that's it. And I think it should start in the morning. Don't wait until later in the day when you're starting to crash, when your energy's crashing. So that's why I love when you said you go for walks. So that's one of the first things I do in the morning. I love going for a walk in the morning. It's really helpful. So for me, it's really a matter of journaling in the morning, meditating in the morning, drinking some water with some lemon or whatever I can put in the water to just kind of purify and cleanse myself, a shower, but also just prayer. That's my self-care in the morning. And I think it's really about what can you do, and then push-ups. Actually, push-ups are another thing too. So it's like, what can you do
that's
for
how
your
many, how
mind?
many, I'm gonna put you on the spot and ask you, how many are
Well,
you
the
doing?
goal is the goal is 100 a day, but sometimes, I'll be at 50 or 60 a day. Lately, I'm not
Yeah.
gonna lie, this past week I haven't been so on point with my push-ups, but I think it's just really a matter of like, how can you take care of your mind? How can you take care of your creative self, your emotional self, your physical self, and just thinking of, even if there's 4 things, one thing that takes care of your mind. And like, I just have to reiterate on meditation. Like, I started meditating in 2014, and I have to say I wouldn't be the man I am if it wasn't for meditation, if it wasn't for just sitting down. Can you imagine? You can go 7 minutes without breathing air. You can go days without drinking water, but you can't go, sorry, you can go days without drinking water. You can go days without eating food, but you cannot go more than 7 minutes without breathing. So it just goes to show the importance of our breath. And meditation really is just that. Can you just sit down and really take a moment to just connect with yourself? Although the thoughts may come, what does it look like to be able to center and allow yourself just to be with yourself? And I know it can be scary. I think a lot of people are really scared to sit with themselves because of what may come up. But eventually, the truth and the reality is, eventually, with loving kindness, we can get there. But also just making it intentional. To start your day off by pouring into your cup so you can pour back into other cups. But Odian, you touched on a lot, so I'm just gonna
No,
leave it
you
there.
nailed it. And to two, like people will say, "Oh, I just don't have time in the morning. I got to get the kids to school." But like your drive to work can be meditative, right? Or when you
Exactly.
pull up, turn everything off and just breathe for 1 minute. Also, LS Artist is Randall, or sorry, Kofi. He's back. But there was something else he said, and I was like, "Oh gosh, yeah, that's 100% it." But it's we just complicate it. Like, we're so good, regardless of our race or gender, we're so good at complicating how easy it is to take care of ourselves and finding all the reasons why we shouldn't do something instead of all the reasons we could do something.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and also I'm not doing 100 push-ups with you. I hit snooze 100 times, if that counts, but it's, yeah, whatever it is, like whether it's your mind, but like your physical relates to your mind, your health relates to your mind. Like you even said, as it's hard to switch to eat healthy. Like there was a period of time where I was almost 200 pounds. I was very unhealthy, and it wasn't just like overnight to fix it. It was small little things, and it was removing. For every one item of food I replaced that wasn't good for me, I replaced it with a healthy item. Like we want to so often add new habits, but unless you remove the old habits, it's not going to work. And we want to full cycle, we want to go to the gym 3 hours a day. We want to meditate 2 hours a day and do this and do that instead of just like small incremental steps.
Yeah, that's amazing. We lost Kofi, and I think he was trying to join back through his wife's phone, but I keep adding him, but it keeps failing for some reason.
Everything else was fun.
let's let's give him a moment. So Rondell, you mentioned meditation, right? For those who think about it as being very complex and want to start, what advice? Oh, there you go. Welcome back. We missed you, Matt. What advice would you give on this meditation journey?
Meditation, it's funny because the goal is really just to, like, we meditate not to get better at meditating, but I think we meditate to get better at life. And so it's about how do you take a moment meditation can happen when you're going for a walk. And this means instead of thinking about all the things you have to do in the day, can you be aware of the trees? Can you be aware of the squirrels? Can you be just aware of your surroundings? That's one way to meditate. And while breathing. So as you're breathing, you're just focusing on your surroundings. You can meditate while you're washing the dishes. You can meditate while you're taking a shower. Meditation doesn't have to be where you sit down and breathe and for half an hour or an hour. Meditation can happen in 1 minute, can happen in 5 minutes. For me personally, 20 minutes was my go-to. Lately, 12 minutes is my go-to. I have something I listen to on YouTube every single morning that's a gratitude meditation, and it gets me thinking about gratitude and loving kindness. And
Could you share that out?
Sure. If you just go to gratitude meditations on YouTube, I forget the name of it because there's a few of them on there, but gratitude meditation on YouTube. And it's like this pink background that says gratitude. I know that's not helpful.
I think we're listening to the same one, though. That's the irony, is we're in different provinces.
She's an English woman?
Yeah, and she's like,
yeah, that's it.
Like, today I'm grateful. And it's set up in such a way where you can, like, say it after her or just breathe. And, like, if you don't, sometimes, like, if I know I'm agitated and can't sit still, I'll put it on the TV and just watch it. Or... like, my goal is always to listen to it on my walk in the morning, but just sometimes life happens, right? And you can't be hard on yourself. So I'll do it before bed and just stream it through a shower speaker. And because I have like a waterproof one. And it just does such a difference. Like, I notice when I drop the ball in my gratitude meditation for a couple of weeks, I am kind of snarky, right? And even though I've probably heard this gratitude meditation, and tell me if this is the same for you, I've probably heard it like, I think I've been listening to the same one for 3 years now. Sometimes I hear something and I'm like, that's been on you this whole time? Like, the videos never changed. Like, the other day I was, I tried throwing a tree, long story. And so I pulled out my neck. And then when I was listening to it the other day, she's like, I am grateful for my body. And I was like, yeah, I'm grateful. I got to try to throw a tree. Like, now I'm injured, but hey. But I swear I'd never heard her say, like, I'm grateful for my body's movement today. Like, so it's a different experience every time, and you have to trust that you'll get what you need from it. You might not get what you want or what you think you want or what you think you need, but you will always eventually get what you need.
That's wicked. We got like 4 minutes, and I think maybe we could kind of use the opportunity to kind of say, hey, what's one thing that each of you want to leave with the listeners? you know, and I think based on how the discussion's going, like we have to have you back just to kind of dig deep dive and kind of share more deeply. But what's one thing that you want to leave with the listeners?
Maybe I'll add, and apologies for having to step back and come away.
Sorry.
Oh, nice. No, that's cool to see the guided meditations there. Phone died. But anyways, we're here. The one thing I would say to folks, and that fits totally within this theme of mindfulness, but is a different way to do it, is around taking the time to be in nature, and how that is, you know, they talk about nature deficit, right? Like our species spent, 200,000 years living in nature, in small groups. The majority of that time was in the African continent, but all over the globe. And we've been in these urban environments, many of us, for like only 200 years. So how we adapted, how our brains evolved, how we sit, was being in nature, being around a fire, seeing stars in the sky, water, all of those pieces. And actually, one of the things I'm a part of now is we founded a campaign called All Out CA. You can check it out on Instagram, which is all about just showing how people of color from different backgrounds are getting more and more into the wilderness, especially with COVID, and how essential it is for our communities, especially after the lockdown and the effects it's had. And just to say that is a beautiful piece. And they've done the research, just being in nature and taking in the complexity of a forest, seeing the trees sway in the wind, seeing the water, that has the same effect on your brain that guided meditation does, right? It's kind of, you are so present and you're so just taking in everything around you and focused. And as part of the campaign, just on Monday, the women involved did a road trip, and myself and my boy Horace, we worked together at Sea. We just took a day and we went to one of these parks, and we ended up, at a river with our feet in, eating fruit, listening to some conscious reggae, just kicking back. And it was the best. And it was also, how often as men, Black men, do we get together to do something like that? And we were talking about being fathers and our life, and Horace was like, this is like being just back in Jamaica when we would go to the river. And it was such a blessed experience. And we both came away just feeling this weight had lifted off of our shoulders. And so whether it's just taking a walk in the park or going on a canoe trip for 7 days, everything in between, nature is this kind of way that is out there for us to feel grounded, to feel mentally healthy and present, that so often we neglect. And the worst thing is, many of us in this country have been told that's not for our communities. Black folks don't do that.
Yeah.
We don't do hiking. We don't do camping.
Yeah.
Well, many of us come from countries where we were fully in nature.
Running barefoot.
We're going to go running barefoot, go to build a boat, have a bush cook, all of those things that people grew up doing, when it was hunting, fishing, cultivating the land. Yeah. This is part of our cultural heritage, but this limiting conception of Blackness and Black masculinity that we get in Canada makes us feel like, no, why would we do that? That's not for us. And so that reconnection that comes from it, that grounding, that's for me a core part of my mental health practice.
I love that, bro. And next time you're going to do the next one, let's do it in King City. That's kind of one of the reasons I live in that neighborhood, just the nature. Listen, I'm going to ask permission to go a little bit beyond. We're at 7, but I really want to kind of hear last words from Odean and Rondell, if everybody's still good with that. So, who wants to go last?
I'll share, if you don't mind, Odean. Kofi, I'm an earth sign, so nature is my nature. That's where I like to go to be myself, actually. So you took mine. Well, you didn't take it, but I guess what I thought about is this thing right here, how our phones can really affect our mental health. And so I speak about this, like, there's times where we often just are wanting to fill our times and our minds with something. So we just pick up our phones. And so there's a lot of mindlessness on our phones. There's no purpose on our phones. Our phones, it should be something that we use our phones for our benefit, not that the phone uses us for its benefit. And I think it's really important to be mindful. Like, there's moments where I just want to grab my phone, but then I think, what am I doing? And I'm like, I don't actually have anything to do. Like, I don't need to text anyone. I'm just grabbing my phone because I'm trying to not be present. And so realistically, what I'm trying to say is, how can we be more present? And the next time you go to grab your phone, ask yourself, what is your purpose for grabbing your phone? Is it because you need to call or text or reach out to someone? And if it's not, leave your phone be, because we can't be slaves to this thing. And the more technology continues to advance, we're going to continue to be slaves to our technology. And it's something that I think is really, really important to have conversations about, because technology is only getting more and more advanced. And so I take breaks. Some people know, if you know me, like, you may text me or call me, and I may not reach out to you until the next day, because I take breaks. I put my phone away. When I work, I'm working, but when I'm chilling, and my phone is away from me. I don't even like to check it, to be honest with you. And that's just something about me. So I think on that notion is like, how can we be more present? I know this is something that's been said a lot, but how can we learn to be more present? And how can we be more mindful of the thoughts that are in our heads, right? So just as mentally we think to grab our phone, how can we be more aware of our thinking, right? So that we're not led to the place of, I need to grab my phone because I need to fill time. How about we see ourselves like this is us, and this is our higher selves, and how can we be aware, operate from this space where we are aware of what's happening? So not that we're one with what's happening, but we can observe ourselves. Like, Randall, why are you grabbing your phone right now? Oh, I'm grabbing my phone because I just need to fill my time. Randall, why are you angry? I'm angry, just to be aware and have conversations with ourselves, right? Because at the end of the day, some people say, talking to yourself is crazy. But if you don't talk to yourself, I think that is crazy. Who doesn't talk to themselves? Who doesn't have conversation with themselves in their mind? So how can we be more present with our thoughts, with our feelings, with our emotions, so we're not filling our time just to fill our time?
Love it. Love it. Odie,
Oh,
you have the last word.
the last word. You know what? First, I want to reiterate what both of you guys were saying. Like, the conversation about nature is one we're constantly having at Africa Center, and we even next week are doing a fishing event. So if you're in Alberta, we're partnering up with Alberta Wildlife, and they're going to teach Black kids how to fish. And the conversation, like, some people are like, Black people don't fish. And you're like, what? No, that does a thing. And with the social media, it's because at first that was actually going to be what I said, was like, limit your phone usage. For myself, depending on who your phone is, you have to go into a different setting, but you can make it so that you have strict settings on your phone with apps. So for me, like, actually before I started on here, I was like, oh crap, my Instagram is at 20 minutes. So once I hit it for the day, it kicks me off, it blocks it out. It's like 5 minutes to try and get back into it. And I'm like, oh, it's not really that worth it to check that message. And you can do that with your WhatsApp, your Messenger, your Facebook. And it's little changes like that can go so far in your mental health. And like, I promise you, the world does not end. If it's an emergency, somebody will actually find a way to get a hold of you. And my biggest thing that I can say to leave with is, take out time, even once a day, to challenge yourself to find the solution and not the problem. So if it's like with floating, like, floating's $40 a month, and people be like, oh, I could buy a 6-pack for that. But you could also change your mind instead of buying a 6-pack. So when someone gives you like a negative, try and challenge them with like a positive, or why it's a benefit, and make sure you do that to yourself, even if it's just once a day, because you can change your own narrative in such a positive way through those little things. And also, just thank you so much for hanging out with you guys. This is great. We don't do enough of like intergender conversations on mental health. It's usually all women, all male. So being here with you guys is such a privilege. And until we share the knowledge that both of our genders have together, like, we will, what they say, like, you can only, what is it? You can get far by yourself, but you can get long, whatever that phrase is.
Together.
Thank you. I'm like, what's that phrase? So, it's the end of the day.
Yeah. Listen, this has been amazing. I want to thank the three of you for having such great, open, and honest conversation. I think most importantly, for being vulnerable and to kind of sharing a piece of you with everybody else who tuned in. We want to continue this conversation. We intend to continue this conversation. We want it to be cross-gender. We're going to do this monthly. So I really look forward to the next conversation. And I cannot say enough to thank you guys. We are Brothers Who Care. We're trying to build this deep connections, as I said before, driving awareness, having open conversations, and really trying to bring our communities together. And so thank you for being part of this. It was such a great hour spent, well spent. Thank you so much. I'm going to sign off.
Pleasure.
Bye.
Take care,
Blessings,
everyone.
everyone.
Have a
All
good
right.
one.
Have a good night.